What's up, guys? I'm back with my final trading recap of the week on February 3rd. Today, again, I was trading SPY in the options. My main watches off the open were this gap from overnight, 412.88, and the gap from 2 days prior, which was 413.67. With my main level, really what I wanted to watch was this prior day close at 416.78. I got in a bit early on these puts because I was watching with the Discord. I actually got in fairly early on the day. Normally I wait 7-8 minutes, which would have worked out a lot better for my plan. But I got in after a few minutes. I was looking at this VWAP reject. Excuse me. Let me actually pull up the 5-minute C. And I was also, this was the first entry off this 412.90. It initially kind of wiggled around, and I was fine with the risk here. I added again once we got up to this 413.67, and again once we got up to this 414 and couldn't break 414 and couldn't break the 50. Excuse me. Looking back on this trade already, I wish, because I had the 3 different adding spots, I should have added a third of the position I wanted here, a third of the position I wanted here, and a third up here at what would have been my final price level, that 78 area. But I didn't. I added heavily on this first one. I guess I was already experiencing FOMO. I didn't want to miss that trade, but in reality, a third of my position would have been enough for me to get there. I was able to trim a little bit on this dip, but then it just ended up bouncing against me. I added a couple times throughout this uptrend, which in reality I obviously shouldn't have. It was a very emotion-driven day, and I did not exert a good emotional control or my plan nearly at all. Once we got to this level, I didn't even add anymore, actually. It would have worked out, but it didn't feel the need to add. I was already heavily in the position. We kind of ticked our way back up. And I finally ended up closing out, I think, back on this uptrend once we broke this level. I guess it would have panned out a little bit, but it still wouldn't even come close. I had 411 puts to start the day, so yeah, I mean, we almost got back in the money, but that just, well, I barely traded my plan to begin with. That really wasn't my plan to hold it all day. Come around the 926, I actually switched my bias to calls off this big downtick. I added calls at 926 was my initial, and those panned out well. If I cut my biggest takeaway from today was to cut my losers. I mean, I should have cut them. I was watching this 415 area above the pre-market highs, and I even told myself that as a mental stop loss, but I didn't follow it. So in reality, I need to put a physical stop loss in, just so there's no hesitation, there's no nothing. If it hits that level, I'm out. I also need to visualize a bit better. I mean, if you just imagine, I need to imagine when I come to that level, hitting the, down here, sell. And visualizing will help me also do that as well. And it's something that you can practice in your trading and that I obviously need to practice on. Allowing my biases to be switched was actually for the better. I was able to turn around and grab some profits here. I think I grabbed a total of 6 contracts, and I was able to close out 4 of them. These puts put me in a hole of $430 on the day, which was way too big of a loss than I should have taken for my account, about 25% of my account size. We started the day around 2,000, excuse me. But then I was able to get in these calls, and I was actually trimming down on really digging myself out of a big hole. And I was down to my runners. I was fine with that. I had reduced the hole anywhere between 50 to 200 depending on the action, and I was accepting that. I mean, at one point I was down 400, so I wanted to see if we could get a trend day and see if I could truly turn this day green. And there was flickers when we would get to green, $5. And I was away from my computer at this time. Another big lesson I took away is, I mean, you can pretty much clearly see the head and shoulders forming on the 5, but I didn't have a physical stop loss set in place for these runners. I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. And so if we switch over to the 1 minute, I just got absolutely torched. My contracts went from, it was about 170 all the way down to 60 in a matter of, in a 5 minutes pretty much. And that just absolutely torched my profits and put me back in the green. So the red, excuse me. And then it just kind of slowly ticked throughout the day. I held them for a little to see if we were going to get any bounce. Never did. I ended up closing them out for, very little. compared to what they were. I lost probably about 90% on them. So, note to everyone, make sure that you have that physical stop loss set in place in both instances. If I had it here, it would have kept me, even if I had it down here, it could have saved me $100, $200. And if I had it over here at the 415 level, then I wouldn't have let myself run and have such a big loss on this. It would have still hurt, but it would not have been anywhere near it was. A big reason I think that I left my runners going here is that I really wanted to see my day come out green. And I just didn't, and this is what really hurt me. In a matter of 5 minutes, I saw my day go from, a very manageable loss on my account size to a painful one again. So my big 2 lessons is emotional control. You got to have that, visualize those stop losses. And then, such a simple boneheaded one. Make sure that you have a stop loss set in place, or a sell limit, for these runners in this instance, and then a stop loss in this instance. Make sure that your emotions can't get in the way, and it's a foolproof system. You hit this level and it sells for you. The computer does it. You don't even have to go through the process of clicking twice and thinking about it. It's out. And in this instance, it would have saved me. I just got the trigger on my phone that we had broken. I believe it was this level, 415.50. I go to check, and next thing I know, we're all the way down here. It was on my phone, so slightly delayed just because of connection and everything. And I couldn't even get to it fast enough. By that point, I wanted to see if we were able, if this was a true market reaction, or if we were going to snap back up. But I couldn't even find news for what it was. And it was true market reaction, so I ended up having to sell out for quite the loss on those. So those are my biggest, the 2 biggest takeaways, guys. Emotional control above everything else. And I always preach a trade smart, trade safe. I did not trade smart and I didn't trade safe, but I did trade to see another day, which is a big thing. We still ended the day green onto the what I think for market coming. We ended the day green, but kind of in a weird situation. We have this massive wick up to nothing, but because we ended green, if this had ended red, that would spell bad news for me. I don't know. It's an interesting mix. I think the weekend, if any news comes out, about Ukraine, we've kind of digested a lot of that. Ukraine, and then the debt ceiling on Congress, and the government rather. So if anything comes out about those, I easily to the downside. We have some room now. We're running away from these moving averages, and I think from this point, realistically, we come down and test 410.60. All else aside, it seems like a very reasonable area, and more specifically, just 410 in general. I think we come down and test that area before we move higher. This was such a big movement out in a 3-day span that I think people want to see if this was a real breakout. And the best way for us to do that is see if support is still held around this 410. If it is held, then I think we easily come back up. Maybe not quite as fast, but slowly tick our way back up. And if it's not, then realistically, we come back down, depending on how bad, but this 400 area is always just a big level of support. You can just see how much chop we have there consistently. So that's what I'll be watching come Monday. Obviously, pre-market and news will play the biggest role, but I do think at this point we come down to this 410 and test it. From there, it'll just be up to what the market thinks and what people think. As for the sentiment, whether this 410 area holds and acts as support, or if we break through it and then it acts as resistance again. As always, like I just said, make sure you trade smart, trade safe, and live to trade another day. I hope you all ended up green and did a lot better than I did. Otherwise, have a good weekend.